So Jeffrey, Tabs just said about how you came to the project, but what made you say yes when they asked you?
Oh, I had a feeling this would come about somehow because back in the early 90s, I was living in San Francisco, and I was going through all the records in a thrift shop looking for, cheap records to buy, and I found one of Tab's albums. And I remember... Yeah, 25 cents. And I remember at the time thinking this means something. And I also found one of Tony's old records. And I've had those two album covers hanging on various bathroom walls for 25 years. And then reading Tab's book about 10 years ago or so, getting to know him through reading the book, and then getting to know Alan and Tab making the Divine film, it all just sort of cosmically came together. And in fact, Tab's birthday is July 11th, which is also the birthday of Jack Wrangler, who I made a film about, and also Vito Russo. So this is in the stars. Something is going on, and I don't know what it is, but we're all here today to celebrate him.
And a question for Alan, actually. Was it hard to get the financing together to do this kind of... Because this is not a story that you get to see at all, which I think is why it makes it so special. Right. So it just, was it crowdfunded or...
Well, first of all, financing is never easy to raise when you're doing a movie. And it was a 6-year journey. And actually, our co-producer... once we found him through Neil Koenigsberg, John Baccardo, the movie all came together. But it was in fits and starts. We would film for 6 months and then have to wait until the next batch of money came in. And, it was a very slow process. And it was very difficult to get Tab to agree to even do the movie.
That was going to be my next question, actually, to both of you.
Yeah.
What made you
He's a very private person. He never... listen, I had to read his book to learn a lot of... I was with him 33 years. Before that happened. And he's a very private person, and he was very hesitant to do this. But he was very comfortable with Jeffrey, and he knew that I would honor him in a way. And this was the result, what you saw.
So, Tab, let's just talk about, you first met Jeffrey on the I Am Divine documentary, and obviously you worked with Divine. I don't know if you want to kind of share any experience of, what made it easy for you to kind of talk about Divine in Jeffrey's documentary, and then when it came to talking about yourself in this one, there are times on camera that you feel quite, you can see that you're struggling to say some of these things because you're such a private person.
Well, I'm from an era that just wasn't blah, 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 right out there. I had a very strict German mother. Working with Divine, she was wonderful, but she was very supportive. Elevate your thinking. She was full of these cliches, all kinds of wonderful things, nothing for show, so I went up in show business, she was really something. But Divine was a special human being. Divine was like a big beached whale out of the costume. And I always said that Divine was one of my favorite leading ladies. I think of Geraldine Page, Sophia Loren, Natalie Wood, Divine. And I've got to tell you, it was really, really difficult. So it was wonderful when Jeffrey, when we were able to do something in his documentary on Divine. And I have to say that all those wonderful stills and all that wonderful memorabilia that Alan collected for years, I used to say, why the hell are you collecting that? I never collected a thing of myself. He got all of that stuff together for this, and I was impressed.
I do want to say one thing. When I met Tab, he didn't have a still of himself. He had given his gold record away. He kept nothing. He just wasn't interested in his past. And I, like Tab said, I had to recollect all of this. But I think that's why he ended up the way he did, he never bought into the fame when he got it, and then when it passed him by, he never had a yearning to hold on to it. He just went on to other things with the horses and just lived a very nice life and didn't, let Hollywood destroy him in any way.
Yeah, right. All I have to say is, as we speak, my mare, who is now a star, Harlow, is due to foal at any minute. And I'm terribly excited. I bred her to a real lovely thoroughbred stallion because she needed a little dignity and class in her. So I'm terribly excited about that.
She couldn't be here tonight, Harlow. She sends her regards.
Jeffrey, do you want to just speak a little bit about the process of getting someone who is intensely private and then someone who really wants the film to be made, you know?
Well, we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Alan, obviously, because Alan was pushing, and I think he's
very pushy.
He pushed Tab out of his comfort zone, which was you could see the end result there, and you can see in the film Tab squirming a little bit, and there was a lot of that going on. But I just wanted to make Tab feel comfortable because I think everyone here is so curious about your life.
Wonderful to work with.
Well, thank you.
Very easy.
But you know, I'm so impressed with Tab because he is from a different generation and another time where you're not, you know, taking pictures of your lunch and putting it on Instagram for the world to see, and that privacy is very refreshing in today's age. So the fact that Tab would never, I don't know that you'd ever refer to yourself as a role model, but I do see you as a role model, and the fact that you've lived your life with such dignity and such self-acceptance. I mean, it's a journey of self-acceptance. That was the reason I wanted to make the film, because it is a journey of self-acceptance.
I think an important thing also is a lot of people have no idea what the industry was like then. Today, the studios are, you know, major corporations doing gazillion-dollar pictures that you go, ugh, you know. But I think that you have these wonderful moguls like Jack Warner, Harry Cohn, Daryl Zanuck, you know, Louis B. Mayer, and they ran a very tight ship. And it was a whole era that will never, ever be again, but it was wonderful to be a part of the end of the studio system. People like Tony Curtis, Janet Leigh, Natalie, myself. You know, we looked up to the stars that were before us, Tyrone Power, Humphrey Bogart, and so forth. So it was very exciting, and I'm glad that we could share that also with a lot of you who probably had no idea what it was like then. Yeah.
And
Alan, do you want to say anything? And Neil.
I'm talking.
Wonderful collaboration, and I think we're all here for a reason. That I met Jeffrey at a party somewhere in the middle of whatever, and then it all sort of
I like the sound of that.
took off, and it's a terrific film. John Boccato, our co-producer, was instrumental, but it's really been a terrific collaboration. I'm so proud of the fact that, and I met Tab and Alan. I had a second home, a condo, when I was in Hollywood, in my Hollywood career, in Santa Barbara, California, and I found out they lived 2 miles away, and they invited me to a dinner party one night, and we became great friends. And he said, well, one day we'll work together and do something. And
This is the result.
And
of
this
that.
is the result.
The questions about archival material and photos and clips and that sort of thing. And in terms of acquiring all that stuff, when you start one of these things, it's an archaeological dig trying to find it. But as Alan said, there's a storage unit in their backyard, a giant metal storage unit, and they call it Villa Debris. And you open up you open up the unit and everything's in there. And like Alan said, Tab didn't have any of that memorabilia, so he has literally spent the last 30 years reacquiring all this stuff. So when we were ready to go, it was really all there. We had to find a few things, but it was really all there. And then in terms of clearance, we did clear a lot of it, and then also a lot of it is used under the fair use laws that are very that are a lifesaver for documentary filmmakers. So that's a whole. It's opened up a lot of opportunities to make films about popular culture using fair use.
Alan Carr produced that film, and I was thrilled when he asked me to be Mr. Stewart, the teacher who gets the chance to sing that wonderful song, Reproduction. That was great fun. And working with Connie, who I knew well at Warner Brothers. So that was all a very, very nice experience. Alan Carr, I want to add this, was the one who gave us our title for our film, Lust in the Dust.
Great
It was.
title.
We had the comedy western. We didn't have a title for it, and he said there was a film called Duel in the Sun with Jennifer Jones and Joseph Cotton, and jokingly they all used to refer to it as Lust in the Dust. And he said, I think you should call the film Lust in the Dust, and we snapped it up immediately. No, but Michelle was the best, and that film was funny because it was released and it was kind of ugh, and now all of a sudden it's really jumped to the fore and I've gotten a lot of residuals. $1.35 here, 65 cents here.
Excellent.
I think the important is being true to yourself. It's very difficult for young people today. But they can be accepted and out there a lot more. But there are a lot of people that still live with a lot of guilt and fear and all of that. I just think we have to go down the road and just do the best we possibly can. People are always going to condemn you and criticize you and what have you. But I worked with an actress by the name of Geraldine Page years ago. And she said to me, I said, Jerry, you're so lucky. Everything you do is perfect and people just love you because you're brilliant. I said, critics hate my guts and it is so difficult. She grabbed hold of my arm and she said, remember this, Tab. If people don't like you, that's their bad taste. And I said, Jerry, I will never forget that. And furthermore, I pass that on to everyone who feels inferior or insecure in any possible way. It was not accepted at all. I mean, people they made a little, they might make a little snide remark, Luella Parsons in one column or Hedda Hopper in another column, but they didn't dare because the studios ran a very tight ship. I remember one time being in an interview and the press was there and the guy was getting a little out of line and I was getting very nervous and just not comfortable. And I just looked at the guy from Warner Brothers and I said, this man is making me feel uncomfortable. Can we ask him to leave the room, please? And they asked him to leave the room. That wouldn't happen today. They would go blah, blah, right in your face, and they would want to know everything. There was something nice about the privacy that you could try to have, but they didn't talk about those things. Every studio had a different reaction. I talk about Tony at Paramount. Paramount told Tony not to see me. They knew about Tony. Jack Warner, whether they knew about me or not, they never said a word out of line, which surprised me. But if they were not going to say anything, I'm not going to say anything because I'm just not one to be like that. I'm awful happy. I'm waiting for Harlow to have her baby. It depends. I don't know. Maybe I would. For John Waters, I would do anything. I would go back to John immediately. He's the best. And he was very comfortable to be around. And Divine was very comfortable to be around. No. But as far as other things, I just don't know. You have to see what's there. I think it's material.
Ask his agent.
Oh, yeah. Alan's the pushy one.
Yes, he's going back to work right after we leave this.
See, to me, that was not a Hollywood film. It was a John Waters film. And I had no feelings about it other than the fact that I loved the material. I was crazy about John. I was crazy about Divine. And I wanted to be a part of that. I think we can have I've had a lot of fears about things in my life. Everyone has that. And I just figured take the plunge. If, like Jerry Page said, if they get your message, fine. If they don't, that's their problem. It was a wonderful opportunity to work with creative people, and it was just a low-budget, simple film. I got back to Hollywood after doing the film, and the Screen Actors Guild called me in to wanting to know if we followed the rules and broke at a certain time for meal penalties and all of that stuff. And I said, oh, it was perfect, and I lied. I said, yes, it was. I said, John, it was like doing an A film. It was wonderful. We slept on the floor. We ate cold pizza. I talk about it. But all the people on the board, they were all actors and actresses I'd worked with before, and they all know it's about working and going from A to B. And that's what life is about, communicating and going from A to B to C, so we should try to do it.
Absolutely.
But it was a wonderful experience.